All right. So, welcome to the Big Brain Media Podcast. Obviously, you're Nicktacula. I'm JoelfromAus. You're also Nicktacula on Twitch, as well as just about everywhere else. Is that correct?
That is.
Yep. Whereas I'm only JoelfromAus on Twitch because someone still has my name. So, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me on, man. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. Good to have you here. So today we're talking about basically CPUs and all that sort of stuff to do with technology.
Excellent. What I love.
It's the heart, the core of our computers, you might even say.
Oh, absolutely. And boy, is the world changing in that regard.
Yeah, which is a part of why I've sort of brought it up is because in the past couple of years, especially, we have seen just a huge shift in the CPU market for the better. And it's fantastic.
It's been pretty crazy where, I mean, you want competition. Competition is great. You've got a classic situation where Intel has gotten too cozy at the top, trying to ride out 14 nanometer processors because they want to save as much money as they can.
Yep, save that money in R&D and instead just use the technology they've already developed and just keep iterating on that.
Yeah, they just want to hold out. Like before they go investing, millions of dollars into the new processors, they got too comfortable, and that's because of the Intel CEO got too comfortable trying to squeeze as much as they could out of 14, and then here comes AMD, coming out of the gate swinging. Look where they are now. AMD is just destroying the market. And now even with Ryzen 5000, Intel can no longer be considered the fastest gaming CPUs anymore. AMD are hitting the same, if not just above in terms of clock speeds. So with that, it's just like, why would you even consider an Intel CPU? And Intel is now playing catch up. It's
really this incredible underdog story when you think about the AMD for years was just not a competitor. And then out of nowhere, well, not out of nowhere, but Ryzen comes forward and just starts absolutely handing Intel's butt back to them. It's incredible.
Even when Ryzen first released, like the first Ryzen chips, they were decent. It was AMD's like new attempt at like kind of tackling the CPU market. Like those first Ryzen chips, they were okay. They performed well. They were cheaper than Intel equivalents.
Much cheaper. That's one thing that always stood out to me when Ryzen first launched. Because I had AMD back in the day and had bad experiences with AMD processors. So when I heard that AMD was releasing a new processor, I wasn't that excited until I started hearing about this Ryzen processor, which was very good. It well and truly stood up to Intel, but was also like significantly cheaper. That's when it piqued my interest.
And it was like the start of their like sort of new architecture, their CPUs, and Ryzen performed well. It was a lot cheaper than Intel, and it still performed pretty good and pretty close to what Intel was offering in the different SKUs. Eventually, you get Ryzen 2000. That was a big step up. That was when Intel was really bringing the heat to multi-core performance over Intel, and then that was causing some people to switch. Like I still remember, going back years ago, I was totally on the Intel side. Like Ryzen 2000 was out, and I remember some friends were considering going, Ryzen 2000, like going with like a 2700X and stuff like that. And I'd be like, why are you going Ryzen? He's like, oh man, they'd say like, that Ryzen looking pretty good, and they have, good upgradability, and they're more affordable. And I was like, well, Intel's better. They've got the higher core clocks. Their multi-core was still like on par, if not just very slightly above the 2000 series. And I was like,
still like, doubtful of the change. Like Intel is still pushing that quality product, but
yeah, there was like they weren't at a point where it was significantly better. And I was like, yeah, Ryzen seemed cool, but it's whatever. And then AMD flops out their and says, here's Ryzen 3000. And, now it's just toppled Intel completely. The market share has shifted so dramatically.
It's a real wake-up call for Intel as well.
Massive, because they got so comfortable.
Two things I remember vividly from Ryzen being released was within 2 months, Intel's processor range, the price had dropped by, I think it was $100 or $200. in most cases, most products don't have a margin to support a price drop like that. They were able to do it because up until then, they really hadn't had competitors that they had to price against. And then straight away, bam, drops price. And then we saw, what was it, 12 months later, or it might have been a little bit more, we start seeing Intel pushing out processors with more cores, like I think it was the 8000 series, which I got one of, purely because at the time I still wasn't confident on Ryzen, but Intel finally pushed out, it was a 6-core processor. So it wasn't anything incredible in their core range, but still better than what they'd been doing up until that point, which was completely 4-core processors.
Yeah, it's just we as consumers, and especially as enthusiasts, more so enthusiasts than I'd say consumers, but more so the enthusiasts in the tech and gaming sphere. You know, it's like we want better stuff. Like, sure, you want to push your, like, Apple is really bad for this. You know, like why they haven't, you know, they've taken so long to switch their iPhones to USB-C.
Yeah.
Because they want to save as much money as possible and keep pushing existing parts and stuff like that. Like, that's why MacBooks hadn't changed much. That's why their cooling had barely changed, if not at all.
That sort of leads into the next question or part of this topic I was going to touch on. It's with the Apple MacBooks changing, and the Apple Mac range changing to ARM eventually. That's going to be a very interesting shift. How much have you had to do as far as ARM, like research or hands-on with their type of processors?
The thing with ARM, like I mean, I know a fair bit about ARM after watching just a lot of videos and research and people talking about ARM. Apple is in a unique situation where they can, because the thing with ARM, it's a very simple. It's a more simplified instruction set, but it is very efficient and very quick.
Correct. Yep.
So when you have a chip that is made specifically for one operating system and you're in charge of everything, like now that Apple's in charge of everything, it's such a, like, having a Mac now with these new chips is a very unique experience. And especially once programs start moving over from x86 like over to, you know, they get adapted and updated for ARM, they're going to be very efficient. So, but the downside is that you need to have the support. Now, for laptops, Intel and AMD would need to really work with Microsoft in terms of like ensuring that their ARM, like if they were going to go and make ARM based processors for laptops, that they would be like, they make sure that they're designed with Windows in mind. And that way you have a really smooth experience, but then it still comes down to software compatibility. Software still needs to be able to run on ARM because it's completely and utterly different architecture. You really have to do a lot of work in the beginning that's why ARM hasn't taken off, is just because no one's, you know, there hasn't been a push. Like Apple switching to ARM, I think will be the kicker for ARM starting to take off. But the thing is, AMD's mobile processors are fucking kicking ass. They're efficient, they don't run as hot as Intel, and they perform way better. So AMD's mobile processors absolutely mop the floor with Intel, and they give a good fight to ARM, and they're on it, and you know, it's still running on x86, so software compatibility isn't an issue. But I do think that down the track, probably, like, I think ARM will be the way to go purely because, especially I'm talking in the mobile space, like with, you know, laptops and phones. Phones already use ARM processors, but in terms of the laptop space, I think it will be the way to go. Desktop, I don't think we'll see for a long time, if ever, because, you know, in a desktop you can get away with like a lot more cooling and there's a lot more infrastructure around that. So I don't think we'll see ARM in desktops. I mean, if we do, it won't be for a very, very, very long time, until like Windows is like running efficiently on ARM, you know, like, and when I say efficiently, like I mean like seamless transition between, you know, Windows now and then Windows on ARM. So until that happens, I don't think we'll ever see we'll ever see that in the desktop space. But in terms of the mobile space, I mean, well, I guess that argument's the same way, but it's like they do have a Windows variant that runs on ARM. It's just that so many of the Windows features and programs just don't run properly. Unless
a lot of it relies on emulation. I've done a little bit of reading on that, if only because I've found out that people are emulating the ARM version of Windows on the Apple ARM-based MacBooks, which creates this weird sort of inception this sort of inception effect of Windows emulating programs that are then being emulated by like the emulator on the MacBook for Windows. So you get like 3 levels of emulation. Apparently it runs pretty well though, funny enough.
Well, I'm not surprised considering it is Apple's benefit is they've done something unique because they're making the chips and they already make the OS.
I can't remember the word for it, but it's a complete sort of integration of supply chain and software design.
Yeah. Their Rosetta 2 is very, very impressive.
Yeah.
In terms of just like taking an x86 program that runs on Mac and just reconverting it for ARM. Very, very good. There's still some performance hits because it's not running natively. But yeah, like I'm not surprised. I mean, some people these days will still buy a MacBook and they'll wipe Mac OS from it and boot Windows into it. But the thing is, if you do that, then you don't have access to Rosetta and it becomes this whole thing because Rosetta is only available inside of Mac OS. So it is a bit weird, but I'll tell you what though, like with the build quality of MacBooks, imagine buying a MacBook, you wipe Mac OS from it, you boot native Windows ARM, and there's already, and ARM has been adopted. So there's already ARM-based versions of all popular and common programs that we use. I think it'd be a great experience.
Yep, I do too. Actually, going back to something you said about sort of the mobile devices, such as your tablets, which are already running ARM, but also like laptops and that becoming ARM-based, but desktops being left behind as far as they don't necessarily need to convert to ARM because they don't have to be as efficient or cool. I 100% agree with you on that because, like, as far as pure raw performance, x86 still carries that. It's less efficient and it's hotter, but when that's not a problem, it is just high performing. So I 100% agree when it comes to workstations and that rely on just huge amounts of performance. x86 is still on top, at least for the moment. Who knows? In 5 years, 10 years, that might completely flip. Maybe we'll be playing ARM-based games, emulating our old games like Call of Duty and Modern Warfare and that onto ARM.
That's it's entirely true. You'll never see a game. The only time you'll see a game be made for ARM now is if it's a game that's already being developed for Mac.
Yeah.
But to build a game that's so much work that needs to be done. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes forward. But
yeah,
I think unless
because I was actually surprised when they announced ARM in the MacBooks. They took me a little bit off guard in that there was already one game available that was ARM based, which was World of Warcraft. I can't remember if it was out at the time, but they had an ARM-based variant of the game that you could play on the MacBook. Yeah, I was taken aback because I didn't expect that to happen for quite a while because Apple tends to forget that video gaming is a thing and concentrate on things like, productivity, like editing and all that sort of thing. So
I think they wanted to get one game. WoW's old enough. Like it's a big world. It can be intensive, but it's like I feel like it's a game that's old enough. What you got to remember, Apple is marketing to the very, very general consumer. So what do you do to showcase a little bit of the gaming performance? Well, you get one of the most recognizable games in history. That's World of Warcraft.
Very true.
That also isn't that graphically intensive because it's still using its old school graphics. It has been for years. So I think that's a combination of all those reasons is why they went with WoW. It's just we won't see ARM-based games for a long, long time. At least not until Windows laptop manufacturers start using ARM, which they won't because I think until Intel and AMD start making ARM-based stuff. Or here's a massive flip, right? Nvidia wants to buy ARM.
I believe they already have, hasn't they?
There's some snags at the moment. There's some antitrust concerns with Nvidia buying ARM, so it hasn't gone through yet, but they're trying very, very hard.
Yep.
Here's the thing that I don't think anyone's considering. Nvidia obviously knows that ARM is the future, and they'll definitely use owning ARM as a benefit to furthering their own GPUs. And people think like, oh, if Nvidia buys ARM, that's it, it's over. It's well, I get the antitrust concerns, but like they're still going to be selling to the clients that ARM already has. NVIDIA may own them, but ARM is still going to be a company as itself. So they're still going to apply, supply chips to AMD and whatever for their GPUs and stuff. But I think Intel might be, sorry, not Intel, NVIDIA. They want to buy ARM because they might see ARM as the future. So imagine for a second, imagine a Windows laptop that is running an NVIDIA ARM CPU and an NVIDIA GPU. What if NVIDIA wants to eventually make their own ARM-based CPUs? Because, I mean, you think about it, right? You think about they'd be able to do the same type of thing that AMD does with their memory access. NVIDIA would have full control because not only is ARM, it's like super efficient and can be quite powerful as well. But you have this whole NVIDIA internal chain. And then, yeah, imagine buying a Windows laptop that has only NVIDIA, no Intel or AMD, only NVIDIA. That's what I think they could be planning.
That'd be a very interesting sort of concept. Oh, I mean, I'd sign up for that too. That'd be pretty good, assuming they've done all the right steps, like you said, worked with Microsoft to actually make things integrated and work correctly instead of relying on emulation for everything. That would be, yeah, that'd be amazing.
There's still some parts of Windows that don't work fully properly on ARM. So Microsoft would work out those kinks, but then it comes down to... So here's the thing though, right? If NVIDIA goes and does that and says, hey, we're making ARM-based CPUs, that's essentially like the bat signal for all of these other companies. Like, I mean, Adobe's already working on it because of Mac, but like all these other companies that make common programs on Windows to be like suddenly, oh shit, NVIDIA's making an ARM-based CPU. We better get an ARM-based version of our program ready because people are going to buy that. And then when they buy, they want to have programs that can be ARM-based because that's a big deal. NVIDIA is a big name.
Yep.
It's a big deal if they do that. And I think that'll be a really big kick in the socks to get other third-party programs working on ARM. That, to me, is really, really exciting. And that, I think, would be NVIDIA's end goal for buying ARM. Because if they buy ARM, instead of them going to ARM and making their own chips, it'd be way cheaper, right? Yeah, you spend a whole chunk of change buying ARM at the beginning, but now you own ARM. So now you have control of everything. If there's something that NVIDIA wants to change in their own chip designs, whatever, like they can just do it. There wouldn't be extra costs because they already own ARM. So I think that's why they want to do it. I'm sure NVIDIA knows because NVIDIA can obviously tell how big ARM is and how big it's going to be.
Yeah, they'd have a lot more sort of insider knowledge and probably better predictions as far as how that company, how ARM is doing and how they can utilize that.
Well, also that's a big cash injection. They're spending a lot of money now, but now that now that Apple is doing ARM-based chips, that's going to be a lot of money spent every year developing new chips.
Yep.
So that's a big cash injection. And you've got other companies like Qualcomm. I'm not sure if Qualcomm make their own chips or if they go through ARM. You've got like Qualcomm and then the Exynos chips. So those are the two main...
So from...
in Android phones, those are the two main chips.
I was about to say, Qualcomm is Snapdragon, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still like an ARM-based design. So that still goes through like the ARM organization as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, they've got all these different areas and I actually don't know. I actually don't know this. I don't know if GPU cores are x86 or ARM-based. I actually don't know.
That's a good question.
I'm assuming... I think they might be ARM-based because it's only a simple instruction set in terms of rendering things. But like, because the GPU cores aren't like normal CPUs, where it's like x86 and whatever. I think it's different. 40 billion is how much they're planning to buy ARM for.
Wow. They could send some of that my way. I wouldn't complain, you know. I'm not greedy, just 100 million off the top. That's fine.
Oh, fucking hell.
They
right?
won't even notice it's
Okay,
missing.
so what I'm reading really quickly.
Yep.
NVIDIA's Tegra GPUs. So like the Tegra is like the graphics processor that's running in the Switch, for example.
Yep.
I believe that is ARM based. But I don't know yeah. Seems like a dumb question to ask, but it was just something I was like,
No,
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's really something I'd never really thought of. So just going back to like software adoption of ARM is that with can't remember, AWS with the Amazon cloud service. They're actually making ARM-based servers available on that cloud now as well. So you get to see.
Okay.
So obviously, you've got Apple with the more consumer software-focused ARM sort of division, you think of it. And then you've got AWS with the back-end software changing to ARM. It's going to be a very interesting time as far as ARM support, at least for me personally, because it means that as a home user of ARM, because I've got Raspberry Pis, software is going to start really opening up for that. And like a consumer could soon buy I say soon, but in the next sort of 5 years, buy a Raspberry Pi and have that as a fully functional desktop computer with all the support that would be offered through, say, Windows. Whereas at the moment, you are a little bit, contained in your box as far as what's supported.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very true. I've just quickly read here. There was a project that kind of got put on ice from NVIDIA to embed ARM cores within their GPU packages. So they're not using ARM currently, but that was a plan of theirs. And I think by them buying ARM, that's kind of what they want to do.
Yeah, because
put ARM cores within the GPU to take some of the computational workloads off the CPU and to be directly done on these specific ARM cores, while the rest of the GPU is doing its normal thing. So that GPU is running normal cores at the moment. So that answers that question. But it's definitely something I want to look into. But I think that NVIDIA buys ARM and then they start inputting ARM cores into their GPUs. There is literally nothing stopping NVIDIA from going, hey, we're making an ARM CPU. Boom. Another contender, another heavyweight has entered the market.
Yeah.
In a big way.
Which is good, because we've essentially gone from one company essentially dominating the CPU market space to three at the moment. We've gone from Intel to Intel and AMD and also ARM. Yeah, if NVIDIA also steps into that market space, offering, like you said, fully integrated laptops that has both NVIDIA GPUs and CPUs, that'll be very interesting.
And then you take that, and then NVIDIA could take that a step further. They're like, they can build their own laptop chassis as well.
Yeah.
So they're just like doing there's like an entirely NVIDIA branded laptop. NVIDIA has an NVIDIA ARM CPU, NVIDIA GPU, the whole chassis is NVIDIA. Like it was like manufactured direct, like they handled all of it. Like that would be crazy.
Yep.
Like it would be crazy. It'd be like it'd be like buying a Razer laptop, except it'd just be NVIDIA. Like that would actually be, and I think when NVIDIA would do that is like, the thing is they would need to someone would need to make an emulation like what Rosetta 2 is on Mac.
Yes.
So the same level of how efficient and how great it is at emulating programs, there would need to be the same level on Windows to get the ball rolling. And then as people would start to develop ARM-based programs, and then in turn, ARM versions of games.
Yep. No, totally.
Because obviously...
Totally correct.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's going to be the sort of saving grace of the Apple MacBooks, like you said, is the Rosetta program. Or Rosetta backend, I should say.
Well, yeah, they need to, because no one's developing ARM shit. So
yeah,
they needed to have Rosetta 2. But I think what Apple wanted is like they spent a lot of time developing it because Apple needed to get the ball rolling, so they needed something in the meantime.
Yeah, because you can't alienate
was efficient enough
like half of your user base by changing your CPU architecture without that support.
Well, I mean, because nothing really runs on ARM. Like barely anything is natively made for ARM. So they wanted to make Rosetta 2. They wanted to make it so efficient that it's like, hey, if you want new MacBooks, you have to get these new ARM CPUs, but it's fine because you got Rosetta 2 and everything can run the way you normally would use it, with like a very slight performance hit. Some things run perfectly through Rosetta 2. Some things have a few minor kinks, and then you've got some programs that run okay through Rosetta. So it's a little bit of a range.
Yep.
But at least like for the most part, things work. And they work fine. And that's a big testament to Apple. Like there's some things I really don't like about Apple, But then there's some things that I really do like, and sort of their attention to detail and quality is definitely like, and in terms of their like sort of their quality of hardware and stuff like that is definitely appreciated. I do like Apple for that. However, I don't like that I don't know if you know this, Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Once there was rumors of Apple making their CPUs, right? They brought out the last MacBook Air that was running like the Intel CPUs. And the cooling was abysmal.
Yeah.
Absolutely abysmal. Like it was passively cooled. It wasn't enough to cool that chip properly.
Yep.
And so everyone theoried, and I'm very much, and then once the chips were once it was announced and they started rolling out these new M1 chips in all of their SKUs, it made sense. Apple purposely, they changed their internal architecture, or their internal manufacturing and cooling for like the MacBooks while still using Intel CPUs. They're like, we don't care. Like they literally said, yeah, people are going to buy this laptop. It's going to thermal throttle like a bitch, but we don't care because we're getting ready for the ARM chips. So they intentionally hurt their last models of Intel CPU based MacBooks because they knew that they were going into ARM. And that's just like, in a sense, like I get it, but at the same time, it's like you are spending so much money on a product, like on an Apple product, and then they go and do that to their consumers. Like that is shit. That is bullshit.
Was it from a corporate point of view? Oh yeah, it makes sense. You've got to get rid of these, older computers. You've still got to move them, but you also want to transition to the new ones while, integrating those new parts into the design so that they're cheaper when to do. But from a consumer point of view, like none of that matters if your laptop that you just bought doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's the silliest way of doing it. And I've seen, because I've followed quite a lot of the Apple news, and I've seen with the past, say, 3 generations of their MacBooks, no one has been happy. A lot of people say, I think it was 2016 or 2015 was the last good MacBook. And that's a really sad thing to hear about as this $1 trillion company, that for the past 4 years, at least part of their range, they've just been completely dropping the ball.
Yeah.
I actually had someone at work recently who asked me about, because they're one-eyed Mac, they said, they're going to buy a new MacBook. And I said, if you can, just wait. So just wait, because at that stage, the ARM-based stuff was rumored but not announced. So I said, just hang around, and once they announce something, if it is these new ones, you'll be much better off getting that. And they were smart enough. They waited. It was like 3 months they went without any sort of computer. So kudos to them, because I don't know if I could do that. But they waited.
That's rough.
And got the ARM-based one. And they said, it's good. I'm glad I waited. I'm thinking, yeah, it's a good thing you did, because I reckon with the old ones, you'd probably be happy because they're not super users. Like they just use it for browsing the internet and that. But I'm like, you are much better off with what you got.
100%. Like it was just, I was so just annoyed that with Apple, because, because they watching like Linus Tech Tips and other tech channels like that, Jay's 2 Cents and Dave 2D. Those last Intel MacBooks, they opened them up and then they looked at the cooling and they're like, what the hell is this? This is totally not enough for the CPU.
Yep.
And it made sense. Because Apple's like, we don't fucking give a shit. People are going to buy our Macs regardless, and they don't care. Macs have thermal throttled for years because of their cooling and how thin they are.
Yep.
And they're like, they just didn't give a shit. And it's really shitty.
I'll never forget
they did that.
Reading people's takes on buying these, like a $4,500 MacBook Pro. And then they did tests and they throttled the shit out of them because there wasn't enough cooling there. So you've just spent, frankly, a lot of money on a laptop. And then it doesn't even perform to its maximum performance. Like it would start throttling as it idled. So when you actually put it under load, it couldn't do that. So that's just the worst case scenario.
Yeah. Oh no, they've just been terrible. Macs have been terrible. And don't get me wrong, like I do like the build quality of Macs. I like them a lot, I think, and they're very thin laptops and they're great. macOS is fine for the most part, but just too much of what I do and what I use is Windows based, so that's why I've just never.
That's exactly where I'm at as well.
But listen, like, don't get me wrong though. With credit again to Apple, macOS works. Like, it is rare to run into issues on macOS. It is very, very rare.
Yep.
Like, with the amount of issues that like I've had with Windows in the past, like and people all around the world have had issues. Like when Windows pushes an update and it like just breaks shit.
I don't know about you, but streaming and Windows updates are like the bane of my existence. Because one of those suckers come through and then like 3 of my programs stop working. You just like every time, every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, moving forward a little bit, speaking of streaming, because I know we've spoken before that eventually you'd like to go to a dual streaming setup. And I've got a bit of a question for you. I'm a little bit curious because I think you said that you would use your old PC as the secondary, the stream PC.
Yes.
And you're running a Xeon processor, is that right?
Yeah, I'm running a 7820X.
Yep. So my question for you is, if you transition to having dual PC and using that as a stream PC, would you use hardware encoding, such as like NVIDIA's NVENC, or would you switch to X264?
It depends. I mean, for the most part, I probably will switch to X264. And I would crank that, down to medium or even slow.
Yep.
Because all it does, it's just encoding.
Yep.
I've got decent cooling on this CPU. I've got a 240 millimeter rad.
Yep.
AIO. So it's got very decent cooling on there. I probably would switch to X264 because NVENC is freaking phenomenal, and especially like as Nvidia's cards get better, NVENC gets better.
Yep.
NVENC is the equivalent to medium/high, or medium/fast, I think it is, on X264. So, and it's really freaking good. It's really, really freaking good. I love NVENC because I've been using, like, I had to switch to NVENC. Like, I feel like if you're single rigging, you need NVENC.
Yep.
Unless you've got like a fuckload of cores. Unless you're running like a 3950X or a 5950X or even like a Threadripper. Yeah, if you're dual rigging, then you're splitting the workload. In terms of a dual PC setup, like, what is this PC going to fundamentally be running when I'm running a dual PC setup? Well, it's running OBS. It'll encode. It'll run, a few of the programs that I need, and that's it. That's all it's going to be doing.
Spot on.
So I probably will, end up switching over to X264.
And that's actually kind of exactly the answer I was expecting. Once you've freed up that PC and X264 is just better quality, there's no reason not to use that.
No.
You've got the power there in that CPU to handle it. Yeah, you can push that through it,
Yeah, but only you can run X264 efficiently at like medium or slow or slower.
Yep.
Only if you can run it at those lower levels. Anything higher than medium or fast, like you're better off going with NVENC.
Yep.
Because plenty of people done tests, like especially Epos Vox, like he did plenty of tests, and NVENC was like pretty on par with like medium X264, which is a very like big testament. So like, but yeah, if your second, like if your encoding rig, can't efficiently do medium or lower, then yeah, I'll stick to NVENC. Even if you're running if you're running a dual PC setup, because some people they'll build a really sort of cheap second rig so that they can do dual PC setup because it just has to encode.
Well, actually, touching on that is I can't remember his name now. Alpha Gaming put together a PC that was only using a Ryzen 5 CPU, the lower one, a Ryzen 5, and I think it was a NVIDIA, was it a 1660 they brought out not long ago, which had, like, it was their cheapest gaming entry GPU. With NVENC.
Yeah.
And
1660.
And by doing that, the streaming PC costs next to nothing because it was all cheap parts. But because it was running NVENC, you're still able to put through like very, very good quality.
If all like just by going with the lower tier GPU, it's just that, like, I think running NVENC will just use a bit more of the thing is, though, what everyone forgets to realize is that NVENC is run on a separate chip entirely.
Correct.
To the actual GPU. Like it communicates with the GPU. It has to. But NVENC is an entirely, like, that's why NVENC is so good. It is a dedicated chip on the PCB that is just for encoding. Just that's its only job. And it's very good at its job. So that's why, yeah, like that's why you won't, like, the GPU doesn't have to work as hard. Like, you know, NVIDIA is only going to further increase NVENC. Like, honestly, I'm sure it'll get to a point where, you know, NVENC will be as good as slow on X264.
Well, it's,
you know, it's like
it's getting there with their most recent in the 3000 series. No, was it the 2000 series recently? They changed it, so it's basically NVENC 2.0. They increased its capabilities quite significantly, and even compared to, so I've got a 1000 series GPU at 1080 Ti, and even going from that to the 2000, quite an increase in quality.
And NVENC as a branding term didn't come in until the 20,000 series, because NVIDIA's I mean, I could be wrong, but like NVIDIA's hardware encoding on the 10 series and before, like it was okay.
Yep.
It was okay. And then it wasn't until the 20 series where it was like, okay, this shit is like, yes, let's rock and roll. I'm really excited to see where it goes. I mean, look, honestly though, even if you continued running NVENC, like, or even if I continued running NVENC on the encoding PC, it would just give more longevity to the CPU because you're not pushing it as hard.
It's true.
Because like running it at medium and slow, like you're pushing it pretty hard. Like you're not maxing it out or anything. Like especially an 8-core CPU, like you're not going to be maxing it with like a medium or slow, but you're definitely going to be pushing it. And so lightening the workload on it, you know, sort of, it will just increase your longevity. And it just depends on, you know, how, you know, what you want to do and how long you want to try and keep it for. But I think it's entirely possible where like I'll just monitor sort of performance and how hot the computer's getting. Like if it's getting too hot, then I'll be like, okay, well back to NVENC then. There's options. And also AMD's GPUs, I don't think will take off as much as they want to until they come up with a good answer to NVENC.
True, because they do have hardware encoding. It's just it's lacking.
Terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible. It's dog shit. And like, you know, there's people that have said like, oh, you know, I might go AMD CPUs. And I'm like, I'm sorry, GPUs. And I'm like, if you're doing gaming and literally nothing else, just gaming, like, sure, that's fine. I mean, I don't like AMD's driver support, so I would never go with an AMD graphics card regardless. But if you're doing anything else, like, so you're doing like any type of just even local recording, because like you get shadow play with NVIDIA's GPUs. Also, if you're doing like, you know, doing local recordings, like you'll, you know, use OBS, but that's what I mean, right? Because you can set OBS to use either software encoding for like when you're doing recording or hardware. And for when our local recordings, always I've set it to use hardware as well, which use NVENC. NVENC's great for local recordings too. Actually, for a while before the 20 series, that's what the go was. To strew in your live, use X264, and then for recording, like if you were recording at the same time or whatever, then you would use like hardware encoding. Like even on the 10 series, like hardware encoding for recording was very good. It was just the broadcasting, which it had an issue with.
Yep.
But you know, AMD just has a lot to bring to the table with their GPUs.
Yep.
Like sure, they have really good performance at a good price, but I think nowadays there's so much that we all want. Like even with not like anything that's not related to broadcast. Like you think of like DLSS, like, and AMD still needs to come up with their answer to that because DLSS is freaking fantastic.
Yep.
Freaking brilliant.
Well, I might bring up the last question I had for you, which was, where do you think CPUs will be going in the near future? Because we've seen them increase their core count quite significantly. Clock speeds seem to sort of gotten to where they're going to be for a while. Where do you think they'll move from here?
Here's the thing. AMD already did amazing by bringing out the 3950X, which was so Threadrippers are not considered consumer chips. They bringing out the 3950. They brought out the highest, the most amount of cores in a consumer chip. 16 cores, which previously you could only achieve on, you know, like in the Intel Xeon platform or Threadripper, like the first gen Threadrippers and stuff like that. The thing is, It's tough. I think that right now we're in the equivalent of like the global space race. Back in the day when countries are racing to space.
Yep.
Now we've got chip manufacturers. We've got all these different brands, all these players. It's right now it's the nanometer race. It is the race for smaller and smaller nanometer manufacturing.
Yep.
Now, AMD is already running their 3000 and 5000 series on 7 nanometer, and they are already making strides in for the next chips after 5000 to be I believe it's 5 nanometer.
Yep.
Intel is playing really a lot of catch up. I think they've started doing 10 nanometer, but they are working really hard to catch up and do 7 nanometer for their CPUs to catch up with AMD.
Yeah, because that leads to a lot of performance and efficiency gains with those die shrinkage. Well, not die shrinkage, but the process size shrinkage.
Yes, absolutely, and that's why the AMD CPUs are just incredible. But also, by going smaller, you can fit more cores on the die. Now, fitting more cores on the die does mean more heat, but cooling's getting better too. And also they are more efficient for what they are. So I think that we won't see chips get hotter. I think that for the most part, they'll get more efficient. They either won't run as hot or they'll run as hot as they currently are, because the manufacturing process will get smaller. They'll be able to fit more cores on the die, so you'll be getting more bang for your buck. Because right now, at the low end of the AMD CPUs, they're quad cores. I think it's like the 3100 and like the 3200 and stuff like that. They're quad cores.
Yep. Spot on.
And same with Intel. Like at their lowest, in their i3s, the i3s are all quad cores. The i5s, I think there's a couple i5s that are quad cores and some that are 6 cores, or I think they're all 6 cores. And then all their i7s are 8 and 12 cores. Well, actually, no, the newest Intel CPUs, they're all 8 cores. Nothing goes above 8. I think what's going to happen is we're going to start getting more cores. Like the core counts will start shifting down the ladder, if you get what I'm saying. Like you'll see i5s with 8 cores, like as a commonplace, and then the i3s will be 6 cores, So they'll be able to fit more cores on the die. And as parts eventually become more available, they become more affordable, and you'll just see them just fitting more cores on the die. Like, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing like a 24 core top end, 6950X. Well, I mean, probably not that soon, but like as an example, the 950X SKU of the AMD CPUs. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing like a 24 core. And then we still have like the 16, and then 16 cores are moved down. So just to make it easier, right? Imagine 5950X is like 24 cores, and then the 5900 is 16 cores, then the 5800 is 12 cores. Like those core numbers just shift down the ladder.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're getting more cores for your money, which would then be beneficial to people who are wanting to go on the top end because they want to get more performance, more power, more efficiency. And then on the lower end, suddenly it's way more viable to do budget builds. Like you could do a PC build for $1,000 and like be running like 6 to 8 cores. And it's like, holy shit, what?
Yeah.
That's like crazy. That's crazy talk.
It's funny because if you told me that, say 6-7 years ago, I just really wouldn't believe you. Because at that stage, we've been 4-core for about 5 years. So the idea of having a computer with 16 cores was a very expensive notion.
It was. It's like Intel's top end processors were stupid expensive. Like their 24 cores are like $10,000. And look, you can get a 16 core from AMD for $1,000.
Yep.
It's just absolutely insane for what's happened, and it's just only going to keep going and getting even better, and it's going to be really, really exciting to see what happens. But yeah, right now we're in the nanometer race. Intel needs to catch up. AMD is going to be pushing on 5 nanometer, and they're going to be bringing the hurt to Intel pretty damn hard. But it's going to be exciting regardless. I'm just waiting for the new 5000 ready motherboards to come out this year, so that way I can do my new build and finally get to a dual PC setup and enjoy games at better performance.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I might cut it off there, but thank you very much for joining me. It's been very good.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me on, Joel. It was good chat.
No worries.
Good chat.
And just to remind people listening, you can submit questions to BBM podcast at bigbrainmedia.org. Again, you're Nicktacula on Twitch.
Yes, I am.
And thank you very much for joining me.
No worries. Thanks, Joel.